Okay, first of all, if you're on the long and short paired passages section, I would highly recommend that if you haven't done it already, you do the long passages and the short passages categories before you do this one, right? Because usually you want to get good at doing single passages by themselves before you move on to these paired passages. Now, that being said, if you've done that already, then perfect, all right? Here's the process of how to attack long or short paired passages, either one, all right? It's the same process. Okay, so step one is read passage number one, okay? Now, when I say read, it depends, right? So we taught you in the long passages not to read the passage, and that was because you had enough questions, line questions, to really understand what was going on in the passage, right? So you didn't necessarily have to read. Here it's going to depend really on how many questions there are on each passage. Okay, so if there are only maybe like 2 questions on passage 1, well, that's not going to be enough to know your main idea, right? So you might actually have to read it, which is a little unfortunate, but it depends, right? So maybe look at your questions real quick for passage 1, see if there are enough that you don't have to read the passage. Otherwise, you have to do step 1, read passage 1. Okay, step 2, answer all questions related to passage 1. So that basically means after you've read passage 1, you're skipping immediately to the questions and doing all the questions on number 1, right? You're not even reading or even looking at passage 2 yet, right? Just passage 1. So that's step 2. Step 3, eliminate answer choices in compare and contrast sections. Okay, so for example, maybe one of the compare and contrast questions says, both authors believe that, right? And then they give you a bunch of answer choices. Well, after you've read passage 1, you can basically eliminate answer choices there that don't agree with passage 1, right? You're not going to find the final answer, not necessarily, right? But you might be able to get rid of some, right? And the reason to do it at this point, right, is because you're only focused on passage 1, right? So once you come back to that compare and contrast question after having read passage 2, right, now you have some answer choices that are gone already, right? So you're only picking between a couple and only focusing on passage 2 at that point, right? So that's why you want to do it right there after you've basically read passage 1 and have only been dealing with passage 1. Okay, step 4, read passage 2. Okay, so once you've exhausted all the questions that deal with passage 1, now it's time to move on. You're kind of forced to move on, right, to read passage 2, right? And step 5, answer all questions related to passage 2, right, including these compare and contrast questions that you've eliminated some answer choices, but now you can eliminate the rest based on what you've read in passage 2. Okay, so this is basically how you attack long and short paired passages. As for the details of the questions in themselves, they don't change from the long passages and the short passages, right? So that's why I highly recommend, if you haven't done that yet, go back to those sections, learn how to do those types of questions, and then you can come back and deal with these. Okay? All right.